Well, hello everybody. Welcome to our conference, Navigating Nuclear Diplomacy, Charting Europe's Future Amid Sanctions and Security Challenges. Sanctions against Russia are very much top of the agenda in the EU institutions, and they are subject to a great deal of controversy and argument between political groups, between the institutions themselves. This conference is really going to be discussing those evolving dynamics surrounding the nuclear diplomacy in Europe, particularly in the light of these developments against the Russian nuclear sector. We've got a lot to say on this. We're going to be discussing mainly enhancing nuclear safety, nuclear security, nuclear safeguards, and alternatives to reliance on Russian nuclear fuel and services. We're going to be focusing on fostering political unity and trust within the EU, and we aim to facilitate constructive dialogue and collaboration towards ensuring European energy security in the face of the current geopolitical tensions that have been with us for quite some time, actually, but not as intensively as they are today. We're very, very lucky to be joined by two speakers, ANDRII CHUBYK, who is an associate expert at the Center for Global Studies Strategy 21. In fact, he's a co-founder of the organization, was the first executive director. Also, we'll have with us OKSANA ISHCHUK. She is also a director at Strategy 21. She's an analyst in international and energy relations. And I'm going to begin with a few questions, and I'm going to go to OKSANA first, and I'm going to really ask about the importance of Rosatom in the Russian context. What does Rosatom actually mean for Russian civil and military nuclear sector? What's its role? What's its level of importance?
So good morning, everybody. Thank you, Gary, for organizing such a great event. So, in general, what does Rosatom mean for energy sector of Russia? First of all, we should say that it is a state corporation of atomic energy. It is energy monopoly in a nuclear sphere, like Gazprom and gas sphere, for example. And it unites more than 400 enterprises, subsidiaries, and also it covers all the military nuclear sector. It is responsible for not only for peaceful atom, but also for manufacturing, production of warheads in Russia, and for entire cycle of a nuclear weapon development. It means not only manufacturing production, but also disposal of ammunition and all the things which are associated with military nuclear weapon.
Okay. Can I ask, ANDRII, do you have something to add to that?
Thank you, and hello to everyone. I would like to add only that this company is not only engaged into some military research on the territory of Russia and perhaps in some other countries, but right now this company is responsible for many actions which are undertaken by Russian occupation forces on the territory of Ukraine, namely on Zaporizhia nuclear power station, because Russians do not cover that they specialists from Rosatom are right now managing the entire complex of Zaporizhia NPP and do a lot of things which are not open and transparent even to those guys from International Atomic Energy, which are supposed to monitor the situation. In that regard, it's a company which produce right now very high threats to Ukraine and to entire territory around Ukraine, threatening from time to time with some explosions, some accidents, and other very dangerous things on the station. In that regard, we have to look on the company on Rosatom as a weaponized and very precise tool used by Russia in order to gain their geopolitical and strategic targets. And it's a tool which use every possible momentum in order to gain to this goal. So it can use paramilitary units. It can use other quite unpleasant and illegal instruments. So in that regard, very clearly, it's not the company which can be a partner for Western nuclear companies, entities, and so on.
Your comments there sort of lead me into another very important question, and one which is being discussed quite intensively, certainly in the European Parliament, and that is the way in which Russia, through Rosatom, is promoting its geopolitical goals. Why are these developing nations, those nations that are actually moving into the nuclear sector, why are they choosing Rosatom? Is it political pressure? We are discussing a lot of the new builds at the moment, particularly in the Environment Committee, those in Uzbekistan, in Turkey, a lot of attention focused on Belarus as well, which I think already holds the record for being the most accident-prone nuclear installation in Rosatom's history, and not a great history. What are the motives for developing nations to go to Rosatom and not come to the West?
We have observed for many years development of cooperation between Russia and Rosatom with several developing countries, and very basic principles which are laid down in this cooperation are the following, from my point of view. Russia does not pay attention to the level of professional experience and state of security situation and some other aspects in the target country. In that regard, they just agreed to start big nuclear projects, even in regions which are highly supposed to be areas of some illegal activities, including from international and terroristic organizations, and because of some not very secured national situation. It relates especially to those countries in Asia, and very recent news about possibility to start new projects in Africa. Second, Russia benefits from cooperation between Rosatom as a state-owned enterprise and several state-owned banks. In that regard, they are capable to propose to target countries so-called comprehensive project, meaning that they can offer technologies, they can offer loans, financial resources to construction of the country. They can propose technical personnel and expertise, and they can propose fuel and fuel disposal. So altogether, and plus to this comprehensive project, also quite moderate interest rates for loans. Altogether, it means that Russia can offer countries quite interesting options, quite interesting proposals, and they accept those proposals. In very recent projects, Russia used a new approach, saying that Rosatom will operate the new reactors during the entire life period and will take efforts to repair, to maintain, to refuel, and so on and so on. And the target country has only to accept some electricity prices, which will in turn make profitable the entire project during life period. So in that regard, target country will have limited access to the plant, to the NPP, will have very high risk of being pressed, even for political reasons, and because quite big NPP will produce significant share of local electricity, and in that regard will make dependent nearly all the economic activities in the country, as well as wellness of population. So altogether, it means that Russia is interested not only in gaining some financial profitability from new projects in developing countries, but also to enhance a political and security umbrella over these countries and put pressure on governments in order to keep them under own control. What else? Having new projects, and these projects in foreign countries are quite expensive, even taking into consideration what I said previously. In that regard, Russian Rosatom is able to make the sustainable growth quite secured for a long period of time. And what's more important, in foreign projects, they those guys from Rosatom, they cooperate with many international counterparts, and in that way can attract to their projects quite modern or even the newest equipment and technologies developed by Western companies. Combining it all together, it can produce quite modern reactors all around the world, but at the same time ensure that its expertise is growing on. It's up to date to the modern technologies and knowledge in nuclear sector, and repeat those technologies, bring them to internal market. So altogether, it's quite profitable and makes also sense from political point of view.
Obviously, through Rosatom, Russia is making these countries that you've just been describing somewhat dependent politically and also in terms of maybe economically and in terms of energy. Does Russia then use those partners in some way to circumvent these sanctions that we mentioned earlier? Because let's be frank, in the European Union, Russia does have a number of Trojan horses, and they're quite active and they're quite effective. Because, of course, each of those Trojan horses has a seat on the Commission and can veto anything. Each of those Trojan horses has members in the European Parliament, which has final say over policy decisions now. To what degree does Russia use those partners, as it were, in energy to circumvent sanctions?
In that regard, I would start with a little comparison. Let's look on three big entities in Russia: Gazprom, Rosneft, and Rosatom. The first two are under sanctions, more or less, depending on some special issues. But sanctions are related not only to some limited possibilities for export of oil, crude oil, and petroleum products, but also for imports of very important equipment and spare parts. During recent several years, even Russia acknowledged that production is degrading because of lack of modern equipment and spare parts. The same would apply to Rosatom if we imagine that Western companies will stop delivering all the modern equipment they are delivering right now, both for foreign Russian projects and for domestic. But unfortunately, we observe all around the world that even European countries, Japan, and American companies, a lot of companies still have relations with Russian counterparts and export different equipment, technologies, and spare parts because of the approach business as usual. If not sanctioned, if not prohibited, we will continue our business. It's profitable for sure because it's very technological issues which have very high added values, and those projects require a lot of different modern equipments for billions of dollars. Respective Western companies have special long-term agreements for producing such equipment and further maintaining and replacing. So in that regard, for sure, continuing business with Russia means for them quite sustainable future business environment and secured profitability. However, we all should acknowledge that we do not have transparent access to Russian internal issues. I mean, what Rosatom further makes with all this spare parts and equipment. I would suggest even that officially Rosatom can get, for instance, like 10 units of several spare parts, but in fact it's much more because it's possible just to declare one portion or several items, but in fact supply more. That's unfortunately also quite widespread practice and is used just to get more money. In that regard, Rosatom can easily use a lot of very technological issues, not only to maintain and repair their nuclear facilities, but also for developing new modern warheads with nuclear fuel and other stuff inside, as well as provide a lot of electronics and other technological spare parts to other Russian defense industries in order to enable them further production of missiles, of other technically complex equipment. So it means we through this cooperation, okay, getting money for this cooperation, for these supplies, but Western companies basically support Russian preparations for further war. Right now, it's against Ukraine, but as said by many defense and political top level people in the West, it's highly possible that Russia is preparing for a big war against European countries or against NATO member states. So we just make Russia good job in order to make more weapons, and these weapons will be then hopefully not, but it's highly possible that these weapons will be directed then against Europeans and even Americans. Why not? So we just have to take it into consideration.
An issue that's been very much a hot potato here in Belgium, so in the EU institutions, certainly for the last few days, has been the seizure of a ship by the Germans carrying enriched uranium from Russia to the United States. Now, the Germans have impounded this ship and its cargo due to the fact that it contravenes EU sanctions. How are the Americans going to react to this? Are the Americans going to respect those EU sanctions? If they do not, what would be the response of the German government? If the German government were to release that cargo, that would of course discredit all the EU sanctions and would open the floodgates. This is a news item at the moment, so we don't know which way this is going to go. Do you have any thoughts on this? Maybe Oksana, any thoughts on how this might go and what the consequences might be either way?
If to say about US sanctions, only at the beginning of March, there was hearings in the Congress, in the House of Representatives, where they studied the question, the topic of implying the sanctions on Rosatom. So there is no sanctions in place now concerning Rosatom. Only the United Kingdom is the only country which adopted, imposed the sanctions. And what was the result of these hearings in the U.S. Congress is that they only researched the possibilities of implying these sanctions, this leverage of influence on Rosatom. Concerning the great dependencies on Rosatom, we should say, first of all, that it is not the huge revenues of nuclear sphere which Rosatom brings to Russian budget. In comparison with gas and oil, for example, sphere, for 2023, the export of oil and gas brings approximately $200 billion to the budget of Russian Federation. But the export revenues from the Rosatom was much lower. It was $14 billion. So in terms of money, in 2023, it is a huge gap between the export revenues from gas and oil and export revenues from nuclear sphere to budget of Russian Federation and to budget of war machine, so-called. But what is the main dependence of the West? This is, of course, the dependencies on uranium enrichment and dependence on nuclear fuel. If to say the uranium enrichment, Rosatom controls approximately 40% of world enrichment services. And if to say about the supply of nuclear fuel, Rosatom controls approximately 17 or even from 17 to 20% of nuclear fuel on the world market. So in these two spheres, uranium enrichment and supply of nuclear fuel is the main dependence of Western companies. How this dependence was created? It was created in the beginning of 19th, when American, French, European companies believed in Russian new democracy after the collapse of USSR. They believed in democracy of Russia, and they open their market for entering for Rosatom with dumping prices for its nuclear fuel, for its services in the European market of nuclear technologies, and this is the main problem. A lot of companies in Central and Eastern Europe now are dependent on Russian equipment, also on not only on fuel but also on equipment. For example, in Hungary, we see that new NPP is being built. Paksh. And this is not only the question of this day, of tomorrow, but this is the question of the whole nuclear cycle. So the country where the NPP with Russian reactor VVER are built, they will be dependent not only today and tomorrow on Russian services. They will be dependent for the next 70 and 100 years for this company. So this is the main idea, and the sanctions they are not imposed because of these dependencies. We have seen that European Parliament in 2022 adopted a resolution where it called for imposing sanctions on not only on oil and gas but also on nuclear fuel from Russia. There was a plan of Yermak-Makfol group elaborated in April 2022, also with propositions to impose sanctions on Rosatom. It is also not adopted, but this the latter plan of Yermak-Makfol, it was in the basis of the hearings in U.S. Congress at the beginning of March of this year. They only begin to study this plan and begin to study how to impose sanctions. So we have some progress, but not progress that we need to be done in order to limit the influence of this company on the world market. Besides such countries like, for example, Finland, they rejected the project of building of new nuclear reactors in this country, and there are also some countries like Czech Republic. They also refused to use nuclear fuel. So we have a little progress, but not so much that we need to be done.
Well, on that subject of nuclear fuel, I remember a few years ago, Energoatom actually set up an office here in Brussels, and so we became a lot more aware of what was going on, particularly the relationship with Rosatom. Rosatom had traditionally said that only its nuclear fuel could be used in its reactors, and I seem to recall that Energoatom and Westinghouse together had managed to find a way around this and to produce fuel rods that could be used in the VVER 1200, for example. Is that not a way forward, a way of reducing this dependency on Rosatom? Oksana.
Yes, Energoatom rejected Ukrainian company, which is a monopolist in nuclear sphere in Ukraine industry. They rejected using Russian nuclear fuel, and they completely switched to Westinghouse. So if we in the times of war managed to do this, why European companies could not do this? It is the matter of not be dependent on the aggressor in Europe, and the steps to switch from Russian fuel to Westinghouse fuel, or even to the analogs from Canada, as they also exist. It is the matter of not to be dependent, and the matter of getting rid of this huge dependency on aggressor.
What would you say when it's competing on the international market? Obviously, Rosatom has the advantage of the sword of the Kremlin backing it up. If I were looking at this from the perspective of a Western nuclear company, what would be my advantages over Rosatom? What are Rosatom's weaknesses? Because there must be some. ANDRII.
Yes, thank you. If we look at Rosatom as a company, I just mentioned it previously. This company is highly dependent on wide range of Western technologies. It's about control and maintenance of the operational functionality of units. It's about different electronics, about a really big portion of very important equipment which is used to build up new projects. And if we just observe how it is organized in especially in foreign countries. So we have Rosatom as a general contractor, and many foreign companies as subcontractors, which usually perform a lot of important preparation works, even on the very initial stages of the project, like feasibility study, and a lot of technical preparational work. Further, it's about reactor safety. It's about different, as I said, control equipment, and so on and so on. So from my point of view, right now we have big advantage of Rosatom in terms that it's vertically integrated company. This company is supported by all means from Russian Federation, from the government, from even from military and those private military companies, and so complete support. It means that they have access to financial resources, they have access to security, to providing security, and offering quite affordable conditions for third parties. Contrary to this scope of advantages, foreign companies normally are working in a competitive environment. In that regard, each company which we have in Western countries, they are trying to build up their business quite detailed looking into further perspectives for many years ahead. So they are trying to have long-term contracts. They are supposed to stay by those contractors, which for them are so-called reliable partners. Because several years ago, the same approach was widespread in Europe with regard to Gazprom. Many companies, many politicians said, well, Gazprom is very reliable partner because it supplies us with gas, and this business is going on for many years. Right now, this is quite opposite. So the same can be with regard to Rosatom. As my colleague Oksana mentioned, they revenues for Russian budget are quite moderate, so they can neglect them and just use it as another military tool, as a weaponized instrument to get to the heart of many European countries. If we take into consideration Central Europe, at several countries, nuclear generation makes very significant portion of cheap electricity. So we just assume that it's crucially important for them to keep those facilities running, and in that way securing affordable prices for population and industries. If Russia will decide to stop supplying fuel, or to stop maintenance works, or just apply some things saying about accidents or whatever at these facilities, so local politicians will be very easily pressed, and they will do a lot of things just to make the situation better and return to normal business and functioning of those facilities. But the situation is not so worse as it is presented often by Russian propagandistic sources. And my colleague Oksana mentioned about Energoatom. Ukrainian company managed to introduce a complementary technical approach to the exchange or switching of fuel from so-called Soviet assemblies to made by Westinghouse as a Western company. So it's possible, it's technically proven, it works well, and according to Ukrainian technicians, these fuel assemblies are even more efficient as Russian. So altogether, what we need, it's wide political support to European companies. It's I would say we need a kind of cooperation or consortia between European companies involved in different parts of nuclear chain industry, in order to bring all of them together to develop comprehensive chain of all necessary solutions, starting from conversion of uranium and ending by fuel disposal. And altogether, it will make possible for this consortia to offer for European market very affordable solutions in terms of switching from Russian Rosatom to new European companies, participants of this consortium, and even to offer quite affordable proposals to third countries. and gradually even substituting Rosatom activities on places, and in that way limit Russian impact on third countries around Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and perhaps other parts of the world.
Yeah. Oksana, you mentioned that, of course, Rosatom is a monopoly, a state monopoly. I would argue that being a monopoly is itself actually a weakness on the international stage because, as we all know, competition drives innovation. There's no motivation on Rosatom. There's no incentive for them to improve what they're doing because they've got a captive market, basically, and their decisions are made probably not by developers or by a board, but at government level. And I think we've seen in the West that this is not a very good model. So I would argue that that is itself a weakness. ANDRII, really, you said that political support to European companies is needed, and I would agree with you 100% there. In a geopolitical situation such as we have now, I don't think that governments can really take a hands-off approach on everything as they would do traditionally. We need to be working towards dealing with a worst-case scenario at the moment. What can the West do? What can the European Union do? What can the individual governments, the member state governments do? What can the UK do? What can the US do? What can Japan do to limit this currently existing reliance upon the Russian nuclear sector? We could talk about sources of uranium for example. Kazakhstan comes to mind, Australia, it's barely been touched. The resources are there. It's the political will that seems to be lacking. What can the West do now? What should the West do now?
Mm-hmm. I just wanted to make a small remark about the weakness of Rosatom. We didn't assess, and Rosatom didn't assess the role of occupation of Zaporizhzhia NPP in its future history. What do I mean? Occupying after Russian forces occupied Zaporizhzhia NPP, it was at the beginning of March 2022. Rosatom at the first days placed its personnel there, its staff there, and has taken under its control this Ukrainian NPP. But what was the next? There was a lot of chambers of tortures where the Ukrainian personnel were tortured and were under pressure to cooperate with Russian occupiers. And here Rosatom was in cooperation with the Russian military in this huge violation of human rights. And for now, international organization and human rights organization, they are only researching these cases and assessing, gathering all the information for future tribunals, not only to make responsible the Russian military, but also to make responsible the Rosatom, who was collaborator in these criminals against human rights on the Zaporizhzhia NPP. This is, I think, this will be the main blow to Rosatom on an international arena in the future years when these cases will be properly assessed by international criminal courts. For example, some arguments. Rosatom violated international framework such as UN guiding principle on business and human rights. Organization of Economic Cooperation and Development Guidelines for Multinational Enterprises, and the main one, UN Global Compact. And our organization, together with other Ukrainian NGOs, at the beginning of March, we applied with a letter to UN Global Compact for excluding Rosatom from this agreement, from this compact. And I think this is only beginning of this process. So it should be under responsibility together with Rosatom should be under responsibility together with all military personnel for such atrocities and for cooperation in the torture of Ukrainian staff and Ukrainian workers at Energodar. This is the first. And saying about what should the West do, first it's gradual denial of Russian enrichment services. Of course, the opponents of this principle say that it will takes from 5 to 7 years to reject Russian uranium enrichment services, but okay, here should be scenarios that today we impose sanctions and we apply, for example, gradual approach to denial of these enrichment services. Not at one day, but sanctions should be today, and denial could be in several years, which it takes 5 or 7 years denial of enrichment services. The second, of course, we should get rid of Russian fuel to switch to Western analogs, and the third one should be the prohibition of Western technologies to Rosatom. We should not give Rosatom these technologies because with its so-called peaceful atom, Rosatom blackmails not only Ukraine with nuclear weapon, but also it blackmails the West. See the last speech of Putin in February 2022. It was not last, but it was the last where he blackmailed the Western countries with nuclear weapons. So we have situation where Western companies cooperate with Russia, and Russia blackmails with future nuclear weapon. If to say about precise sanctions, for example, such countries like US should review its approach on previously granted licenses with Rosatom daughters and subsidiaries such as Tenex or Uranium One company. The latter conduct extensive activities in USA, and there was a lot of opponents who said that if we get rid of these companies, we will have high electricity prices, but it's not true. Russians are acting through its lobby, through American lobby, to say that the electricity prices will be high, but generally there is some research that it will cost only from 1 to 5% of hike in electricity prices. So it's not a matter. It's only the work of Russian lobby. So Rosatom controls 76 from 76 to 40% of global market of uranium enrichment, and in the United States alone, here's about 26 contracts for the supply of uranium raw materials with 19 American firms. They should get rid of this dependence and cheap Russian nuclear fuel on the global market. It's led to the not good concurrence and direct ban on import of these uranium facilities from Rosatom would be completely logical and with no special consequences for the US companies. Besides, there is a huge cooperation between French company Rosatom and Rosatom. It should be also stopped, and I think these hearings in the US Congress should be developing further, and some decisions should be done imposing the ban on Russian nuclear fuel and on Russian enrichment services.
We've covered quite a few issues here, some of the problems facing the West. We've talked about Rosatom a little and its strengths, its weaknesses, and its geopolitical importance to Vladimir Putin's nefarious aims. I've got one final question to ask each of you, or to ask you both, and I'll start with you, ANDRII. If you were in Brussels today and you were sat down with the leaders of the EU member states or the European commissioners themselves, and you could give them one instruction, what would their priority be? If you were sitting to them now, what would you be telling them? This is what you must do now to address these problems. It's a tough one, but
I would ask all the companies and all the representatives of national governments to sit together and decide about some kind of unity in the issues how we will use nuclear energy in the future. Because right now I observe division between European countries, and this division is between those which still have nuclear power plants, like France, and those like Germany, that completely switched off. Yeah. Instead of struggling and discussing the issue and trying to make future use of nuclear energy impossible on the European level, it's much better to unite, perhaps on some provisional agreements or memorandum of understanding that, okay, each country is allowed to make a national energy mix as it want, and doesn't matter even if it will be nuclear energy, especially taking into account future perspectives of small modular reactors, which can even, I think, return to the energy mix in Germany. Why not? We'll see. It's the first one. So please unite. Please consider that right now energy security issue, it's more important than provisional discussions about energy mix of the future, mid-term or long-term, whatever. It's the first one. The second one, European Union and the member states should turn their attention back to Africa. In Africa, we have both the situation where Russians are trying to introduce new nuclear buildings, build-ups in very unsecured countries like Niger or Burkina Faso. And at the same time, the European Union has imported quite significant amounts of uranium from several African countries. Due to some sabotages and illegal activities of Russian private military companies on the continent, especially France was forced to withdraw from several countries. I think that European Union is it can introduce very strict sanctions against Russian private military companies, blaming them as terrorists because of atrocities they made in Ukraine and in other countries, prohibit their existence and work in African countries, prosecute them where possible, and at the same time make several rounds of negotiations with leaders of African countries, discuss the possibility how to return to bilaterally profitable cooperation and basically return to production of uranium in Africa, to imports of uranium, and it will be also one of grounds and basic stones for further enhancing cooperation in Africa and further bringing democracy and rules of law, human rights to the continent. Because if EU will leave Africa to the proximity of Russian or Chinese impact, it will in the midterm create another destabilized region, but very near to European borders. So basically, it's much better to have active approach to the problem, try to solve it, as just wait and try to make it's like, okay, it's not our deal, we will direct our attention on internal issues. In our globalized world, all issues are very important. I would even add that European Union should also engage very actively in the Caucasus region and Middle Asia, because even right now, observing that several countries are importing uranium from Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan, so it's not 100% sure that it will be possible in next several years or even months, because Russia is able to engage quite actively in the regional issues and just stop by different sources this cooperation. So if only active approach can help and secure that European Union, and especially those countries which use nuclear energy, will be safe in terms of further supplies. Thanks.
Concerning Africa, I think that actually Putin has an advantage here in that the Kremlin understands Africa. The European Commission expects Africa to understand the European Commission. It's an idealistic approach that the EU takes, not a pragmatic one. And I think that also decision-making is a very long and laborious process in the EU, and it requires unanimity. Putin can act on a whim. And so I think that in the context of Africa, I just want to make the point that the EU is always on its back foot. It's a laborious process to bring about any kind of change in the relationships. It's not for want of trying, it's just that for whatever reason, the two don't seem to be completely compatible. Putin definitely has the upper hand there, and he's not afraid to put a whip in that hand. Oksana, what would you say to the European Commission today when they get back from lunch?
Oh, yes. So what do we have? We have now 2 years of war, not only in Ukraine, but in Europe. And everybody in Europe now is afraid of escalating. They do not want to impose sanctions on such companies like Rosatom because they do not want to escalate. So my main remark will be that they only encourages Russia to intensify its aggression, and by not sanctioning Rosatom, they only stimulates the development of Russian nuclear forces, because Rosatom is the company who is managing Russian nuclear forces. So they only, by the absence of adequate response, they only stimulates aggressor for future aggression, and it will not stop in Ukraine. It is already in Europe, and it will progress on another European countries if not to do adequate response now. And some European pragmatists, which are doing business as usual and are afraid of escalation, by this weakness, they only escalates the scenario, and they only stimulates the development of Russian nuclear forces.
I want to thank you both for joining us today, Oksana, ANDRII. It's been a great pleasure. It's been hugely interesting. There's a lot there to take away. And my sincere thanks to you. It's been a great pleasure, indeed an honor. Thanks also to Quest Communications in Antwerp for facilitating the event today and for making it all happen. I wish you both the very best, and I look forward to the next time we get to speak.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great day.